Welcome to another Japan's Top Business Interviews. My name is Greg Story. I'm the president of Dale Carnegie Training. It's my great pleasure to welcome the president of Abbwie, CEO of Abbwie, James Feliciano. James, welcome to the show.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for coming onto the show. We're talking about leadership.
Yes.
So for some people may not know much about your background, James, and a little bit about Abbwie. So just give us a bit of an idea of how you've gotten to where you are today and what Abbwie does.
Abbwie.
Abbwie, sorry.
Yes,
Abbwie,
no worries.
sorry.
My James Feliciano. I've been in Japan for about 20-something years of my life over the course of 2 stints, or 3 stints. I came here when I was first in college as a study abroad student back in the late 80s during the bubble of Japan, so quite fun down in Osaka. Kind of like on a whim. I had never really seen the world or traveled. It was my first time to get a passport, and I literally landed in Tokyo and then realized I had to go to Osaka. So imagine that in 1989. Took me a long time to get down to Osaka. But I was so green about travel and about international travel, and quite a moment. But you know, that year in Japan really got me interested. I went on and got a master's degree in Japanese studies from the University of Michigan, and then lived in Japan for most of my 20s on a cultural study visa where I studied Shodo and Kendo. I don't do those very much anymore, but it was really a key part of my life back then, while also learning Japanese. And once my Japanese got to a point that was respectable enough, I kind of transitioned into the business world, went back, got an MBA, changed my life direction and went into pharmaceuticals, and then ended up back here in Japan for the pharmaceutical industry.
Were you doing something before pharmaceuticals?
I was actually working for a very major Japanese camera company, working in their office imaging products department here in Tokyo, which was a great job. I got to see Japan Inc. from the inside out, so I learned a lot there. But it was the experience was good, but I really wanted to leverage my Japanese ability more to be more of a cross-cultural advocate than just driving how many pages per minute a copier could go.
How do you get out of imaging into pharma? I mean, that's a completely different field.
It really is. And I think that's the beauty of an MBA program sometimes, because an MBA program, you can really recreate yourself. So I used that opportunity of getting the MBA to do a summer internship at a pharmaceutical company. And that kind of got me the foot in the door, if you will, and was able to segue into a complete career redirect into pharmaceuticals.
And you were working in another pharma company here in Tokyo before Abbwie.
That's right. I actually this is my 4th company over the last 15 years. My original company that sent me over here got acquired. So I was then part of that new entity. And then that company wanted to send me back to America, and it really wasn't what I wanted for my career. So I ended up changing jobs and staying here in Japan. Worked there for a while, had my first experience as a general manager, and then 5 years ago I was able to join Abbwie as their general manager, and I've been here for 5 years.
Well, you've made the transition, right, to get up to the very top of the tree and be the CEO. So if we think about leadership in Japan, what are some of the challenges you found when you moved from being, maybe let's call it a player, to being the leader in Japan?
Sure. It's an interesting question. I think leadership in Japan, I think every country has its idiosyncrasies and is challenging. I think being a leader in Japan, people certainly look to you for approval, for the guidance, for the answers, but you have to also spend a lot of time working the back channels to make sure people are aligned behind it. Because in Japan, at least in my experience with my management teams, if you don't have nice alignment around beforehand, before the ceremonial kickoff of whatever's been decided, the execution phase could run into trouble. So spending a lot of time as a team discussing, aligning, getting all of the airing of grievances out ahead of time, understanding, where people see challenges, and going through that process is really important. You can't just top down be a dictator and say, this is what we're going to do. It doesn't really fly very well.
When did you make that discovery? Because for a lot of Western leaders, that's the model. I'm the boss, my way or the highway. We'll make this happen, get to it. But here, at some point, you must have realized, well, this isn't going to work. What was that sort of discovery process like?
I had a moment. I remember, I was experienced in Japanese culture at the time, but it was actually here at Abbwie. You see these images of Japan sometimes of a very, very, very strong leader saying, okay, this is what we're going to do, and it being really strong and everyone snapping to attention. And we were having some very challenging sales numbers in a launch. And I went into the area meeting, the meeting for the area managers, and I kind of pounded the table a little bit. And I thought that was going to be encouraging and kind of rally the troops around the effort. And it had the exact opposite effect. And that's when I really internalized the fact that maybe it's some sort of a myth. In my experience, that bang on the table served the exact opposite of what I was hoping to achieve. It really actually deflated, and I really kind of lost the team for a moment there by doing that kind of banging on the table. What are you doing? We got to get out there and sell more. But I thought that might work, and it really didn't work. And so that's one big example I can remember.
And how did you know that it didn't work? Because often in Japan, people don't show you what they're thinking necessarily. They may be unhappy about the table banging, but they're not going to necessarily go up and say, hey, James, that table banging, you got to cut that out, buddy, it's not going to work here. They tend to just sort of keep it to themselves. You got to sort of work it out yourself. How was your experience of discovering, well, that didn't work?
I could really feel the cold shoulder from the area managers. And, I think I'm very much, as a person, I thrive off of kind of an empathy, and I think I can read the room pretty well. And I could see the physical change in people in their face, and I saw that it was almost like a slow motion moment of stop, don't continue, because I realized this is not working. And then after the meeting, it's just the body language of the team, and I went to some people that I trusted, and I said, how did that sit? And they said, that didn't sit very well at all. You're right. A lot of times they won't give you the feedback, but if you ask for it, that gives them the opportunity. They will give you honest feedback if you ask for it. And I did, and I got real honest feedback that, I did not hit the tone or strike the tone I wanted at all.
It's good that you had people who trusted you enough to give you that feedback, because often in Japan, the sort of yes man, yes woman approach is pretty well oiled here, they're pretty good at it. Yeah. And so they'll tell you what they think you want to hear, that sort of sontaku, assuming what the boss wants and therefore delivering that without actually having it spoken is part of the system. So It was good that you had that. So how did you think you were able to get that level of trust with those particular individuals, maybe compared to some of the others?
I think, fundamentally my leadership style from the very beginning with my management team and my direct reports is always very collaborative. And when you consistently demonstrate a collaborative spirit, I think it builds a lot of trust and engagement with your team. And it just kind of comes hand in hand. And so that with those people who gave me that very honest feedback, we had a track record of, it was still early days in my career here at Abbwie, but we had the first steps were very much holding hands and very collaborative, and so they were just kind of carrying on in that spirit. Also another key point I think is this is a global company. This is a U.S. based company, Abbwie, and so you get employees who have that cultural sensitivity as well. They're not typical Japanese, especially at the management team level. You know, they've been to America, or they speak English well, so they have that cross-cultural sensitivity, and they can operate in between those worlds. Now, an area manager, you know, from Gunma Prefecture, no, you know, that's a Japanese person, and they have to be treated as, you know, as such. But at your management team level, I have found that they're pretty savvy when it comes to being culturally sensitive and being able to, you know, duck in and out of Japanese or international or American. I think American and international are different things, by the way, you know, but they can weave in and out.
So you've banged the table, upset most of the area managers. How did you recover that? You had the meeting, then, okay, you found out, well, that didn't go down as swimmingly as I thought. What do I do now? What was the next step? How did you recover?
You know, you can't just walk back in and say sorry. You know, I mean, I thought about, okay, you know, I made a mistake here. How do I, you know, make amends for this? And so what I did personally was I went out into the field a lot over the next 3 months for that team. And I went out there on rep rides, and I mean, spent days and days out in the field just to demonstrate that it wasn't this top down, you get it done, but a collective, we need to get this done. So I put my skin, you know, put skin in the game and spent time in the field, and that helped to reestablish credibility. And while I was out in the field, I made sure that, you know, every night I would never eat alone. It would always be with 3 or 4 sales reps, just to build that sense of connection with them, so that they could really see me as a person, and I could really hear what's working, what's not working from them. You know, it's lucky that I speak Japanese, so I'm able to, you know, have that time. You know, there are some stereotypes of Japan that the after hours drinking is very important. It really is. You know, I mean, spending time with a rep, with your necktie undone, you know, having kind of an honest conversation, is important. I mean, of course, you have to remember that you're the president, and, you know, they are an area manager or sales rep. You know, you can't just, you know, open up about everything, and you have to make sure there is a line. And, you know, they might be drinking, so they might become a little more uninhibited about what they say. But you have to, you know, maintain that air of, you know, presidential air about it. But spending that time with them, I think they find to be very, very important.
You mentioned that you felt you couldn't apologize. Why did you think that?
I just thought that just going back in and saying, hey, I'm sorry about that, really wouldn't have had much of an effect. I thought, you know, I have a motto as a leader, you know, actions speak louder than words. And I thought the only way I'm going to get credibility back with this team is to demonstrate it through actions.
And so apart from, you know, pounding tables and finding that didn't
only once
go anywhere.
Only once.
What other challenges have you found as a leader here in Japan?
You know, I mean, as I've been here longer and longer, and it might be different from other people who come here for, you know, a 2-year or a 3-year stint. So my perspective is a little bit different. You know, I do represent headquarters, but I have deep ties and a deep understanding of Japanese culture. So I have to sometimes make sure I don't go native, if you will. You know, you see some people who have been in Japan for a long time, and they forget that, you know, headquarters pays their check. And as a general manager, you really are the representative of a headquarters, and in terms of implementing and executing the headquarters strategy. Now, you have to push back at times and make sure that, you know, whatever's being asked for by headquarters is realistic and achievable, and you have to make sure that your affiliate is well represented. But there's a fine line between being too much for the affiliate and forgetting, you know, who butters your bread on the headquarters side. So as a, you know, what I like to say, as a global executive, you know, you live in between worlds. And in my case, you know, I report into Singapore. So I've got stakeholders in Singapore, I've got stakeholders in, you know, in headquarters in Chicago, and, you know, I represent the Japan affiliate. And just always thinking about that dynamic and operating in a savvy way within that dynamic. it's not easy. I mean, it's challenging. You have to always be aware of the messages you're sending to all these different stakeholders. So challenging but fun. I mean, it's mental gymnastics.
So in thinking about that, in retrospect, if you were to roll back and you had the chance, you never have the chance, but if you had the chance to do that meeting again, where you pounded the table with what you know now, what would you have done to motivate that team in that meeting at that time to save you running around Gunma Ken and Ibaraki Ken, to get the same impact?
I think I would have used what is typically my most used approach is, where are we now and where do we want to go? And, what is the gap? Why can't we get there? And just to listen about, what are the issues and to let them vent and to hear but agree on where we should be, and to get alignment that where we are right now is not appropriate. We're certainly not meeting expectations right now. Nobody's happy. My boss is not happy. Your boss is not happy. I'm not happy. No one's happy. Where do we want to be? Okay, what do we need to get there? What do you need? How do we do this? And, to take a more collaborative approach and involve people in that discussion. I had just had a pretty difficult conversation with my boss who was looking for heads. And, it was a terrible decision. It was a terrible decision to try that approach. I should have just stuck with what I know, which is, where do you want to go? Where are you now? What can we do to get there?
So you probably had a little bit of tension from the boss, and you were sharing some of the tension with the team, maybe.
I did, yeah, I did. And, I should have probably taken a breath, and it was bad timing that I had that conversation with my boss. I knew the area manager, we're having their area manager meeting at that moment. I didn't think it through. And I think, one of the things as a leader, especially when you're in a different culture and you have to kind of, I think, look before you leap. I like to say, take a deep breath, think about it for a minute, but a deep breath is not going to kill you. Take a moment, take a deep breath, get a moment of clarity before you decide on that action. And, I didn't do it.
You mentioned before, I guess you're referring to NEMA washi, which is you meet with individuals who are going to be in the meeting and you basically get a core agreement from key people who are going to be in the meeting. So the meeting is really a rubber stamp for a decision which has been informally arrived at through a consensual process. Do you think that would be something that, again, if you thought about that, I need to get the area managers on board, that you would have done that, you would have more done an NEMA washi style approach or not?
I think so. I don't believe that there's ever a rubber stamp moment. Mm-hmm. So, but I think what effective NEMA washi in the 21st century is you can watch out for the bigger booby traps that could sabotage a decision, and that's where good NEMA washi is. You can walk into a place where you still have a decision to make, you still have a discussion to have, but no one's going to throw a hand grenade on you. I think that's the value of NEMA washi, is to just make sure that the key stakeholders have general alignment which way we're going. You can hear what their perspective is. It might not match with other people, but you can avoid those pie in the face moments or something, really blowing up on you. I guess one thing I could have done, in retrospect, maybe spent more time with that business unit director, the national sales manager, the head of marketing, and spent a little more time in a room, the three of us or the four of us, having a discussion of the issues, and then bringing that back and discussing with the area managers, for example. But I think in the end, any road I would have chosen, time in the field would have been critical. And I think that in the end, we ended up kind of turning the ship around. I think a big piece of it was, me getting out there and rolling up my sleeves and meeting with the key opinion leaders and the key doctors and showing that I was, I had skin in the game.
So apart from the things we've talked about, such as, you're not trying to take such a dominant direct approach and by force of will have people snap into gear, or using a consensus building process in the background, the washi style, what other things would you characterize which you found were quite different leading in Japan compared to, say, leading outside of Japan?
I think that most of my significant leadership has only been in Japan. So that's one, so I'm a little bit jaded from that perspective. I have, of course, worked in America. I've worked on teams in America, but I was never a people manager in America. I was always an individual contributor. And I think, it kind of goes back to a point I made before. You can have much more, brainstorming and, difficult conversations and, dynamic team discussions in a more of a Western setting than in a Japanese setting. You can't just get into a room with a whiteboard and say, let's bang this out. It doesn't work so well.
Why is that?
Because it's interesting, yeah. I think there are a number of things at play. Stronger personalities come out quicker. Maybe there's certain people who have been to the U.S. or been in Western situations. They're used to that, so they can run with it faster. And when you're in that Japanese-only dynamic, my experience is if you get that one person who's pushing it, everyone will follow quite quickly, or defer to, or say, oh yeah, that's fine. So it could be very, very risky. And I think one of the pitfalls of a lot of expats who come to Japan is they find that first-rate English speaker and they kind of cling on to that person, and they become kind of the oracle for everything, and it can be really, really ugly. I think there's the graveyard of expats. A lot of the DNA of great English speakers are on those dead bodies. But yeah, I don't think that the Japanese culture is so strong when it comes to a free-flowing, brainstorming type dynamic. I think they need to have time to think ahead of time. They need to have time or a framework where everyone can have a chance to put in their opinion or their thoughts. So when we do offsite meetings now or whatever, we always work in small groups, but very clear, task-oriented, and we go step by step by step, so that, and we let the teams go off for 30 minutes for that one step, and in Japanese, go after it, but align on that step, and then we go to the next step, sort of thing, so that everyone's comfortable just on that, on that step by step process.
So I was actually going to ask you about innovation, given the fact that it's not that sort of very dynamic Western way of brainstorming. It's got a different tempo, a different cadence here.
For sure.
So how do you get innovation in Japan? How do you get people to come up with ideas?
I think, and here's I think where a strong leader in Japan can be successful, is it's perfectly okay to set the large direction and say, this is where I want us to go. So I have worked with my team now for 5 years. When I joined in 2015, I said, look, I joined in June, and we had an all-employee meeting in 2016, and in January of 2016. So I had about 6 months. And after about 3 months of my first onboarding and listening and watching and learning, I said, look, we need to have clear direction about where we're going and what our goals are. Now, I'm not going to say what our goals are. I'm not going to say where we're going. But all I'm saying is we need to know with more clarity what our goals are and where we're going. So I set that larger frame, and then said, let's work together to figure out what our goals are and where we're going.
So how do you do that in the context of, as you say, headquarters is paying the check here, footing the bill for all this, and I'm sure they had some pretty clear ideas about what they expected from the Japan operation. So how do you sort of put that aside, which is sort of predetermined outcome, and throw open and say to people, I don't have anything set down, we're going to create it from now? You know, how's that work?
Yeah, well, I mean, headquarters always has a finger in your pie, right? I mean, they're always involved. And I mean, the first piece you always have with headquarters is your long-range plan, right? So I think you naturally start there from okay, what is our long-range plan? What's our commitment to headquarters over this long-range plan? What products are we introducing? You know, that's what's the business, you know, over the next 3 years, 5, whatever time period you choose. We chose 5 years. And you start from there, and that's your first line. And then say, okay, what's better than that? I mean, are we happy with that? Is that what we're going to deliver? If we all feel like that's ambitious enough, you know, we got pushed enough in that long range plan that actually is pretty dang hard. All right, let's stick with that as a line. But now let's build around that what we need to achieve it. And, you know, it's not with an organization, you know, if any sort of, there's a financial plan, but you need to have a people plan around that. You know, for any sort of growth plan, and luckily for Abbwie, it's a growth plan. I mean, some companies don't have a growth plan. It's a restructuring plan or right sizing plan or something, you know, whatever the case may be. You know, how do you develop talent? Do we have the right people? You know, I always say right person, right job. You know, as we look forward, do we have the right people in the right place? And, you know, as we, you know, 4 years from now, when that new product comes, is our bench going to be ready to step up and lead that? I mean, you don't want to keep hiring externally, for example. So that automatically creates now a work stream around talent development. And how are you going to, and you've set now a line that says, okay, in 4 years for these new products, we want current product managers to become business unit managers, or business unit managers to become business unit directors. What now, working back from that, what do we need to do to make that happen, to build that talent pool? For example, you know, talk about engagement. You know, one of the things that headquarters gives us is an engagement survey every year. So we can then take the learnings from that and say, okay, you know, where are we, you know, relatively speaking, lower, or what are the areas that need some addressing? Okay, those now, that's from headquarters, but we can use that to help propel another work stream that actually works on those to help drive engagement. And, you know, ultimately that will make us look better in headquarters' eyes, because that's how they're grading us, if you will.
And how about numbers of people? Because I think the numbers you had when you started and the numbers you have now, it's grown quite a bit. So where were the numbers-wise when you started? How many people are you up to, and how many do you need to recruit?
For sure. When I joined, we had about 700, between 700 and 800, and now we're about 1,600. So we've almost doubled, over 5 years, which is a pretty incredible growth story. And then when you think about, when you look at that long-range plan and you're looking at the numbers over time, then you realize, well, how are we going to onboard these people? How are we going to, you know, assimilate them into our culture without diluting our culture, but still welcoming diversity and inclusion, and, you know, ensuring that, you know, people coming from outside are going to bring great ideas and good best practices. So you want to be welcoming, but you don't want to dilute your own culture. So how do you do that?
And how did you do that? You've done it. You've in 5 years doubled, more than doubled the population here. So you must have managed it.
Well, I mean, one thing that we've done is we created a very strong employee value proposition, and we built that bottom up, starting with the second year of our 5-year focus, and we worked, literally every employee touched the creation of our employee value proposition. And what we did was we did town hall meetings, and we asked all of our employees to get into small groups of 3 to 4 people and to talk about when your spouse or your mother or your neighbor asks you where you work and why do you like working there, how would you answer? So, in other words, it couldn't become a complaint session. You know, you don't complain about your job to your mom. You want them, so what would you say good about where you work? And we had a very clear kind of framework for them to kind of fill out this worksheet so that we could then collect all of that. So every employee went to these town hall meetings and participated in that 1 hour session. Then we took from that to distill out the 3 key points for what motivated people about working for Abbwie.
And what were they?
Well, the 3 things were, first, this is a company that we are all building together. So they liked that. That was a key point. The second was that this is a company that is investing in the development of people. So they really felt like there was growth opportunity because we were really pushing that. We wanted every employee to have a career journey. You know, we said, our message has always been, we're a growing company, so the job you have now does not have to be the job you have in 3 or 5 years. You know, we need more people. So, talk to your manager, make a career journey. Where do you want to go? And then let's talk about how do we do, on-the-job training, how do we do feedback, and how do we do actual training to get you to where you want to go if you want to redirect your career. We got plenty of things plenty of places where we need people. So if you want to do something else, we can do that.
So what you're talking about there is leading an intentional life.
Yes.
Which in a Western context is not so surprising. You have goals, you have your ambitions, you set a plan.
Yes.
You take accountability for your own career development. You're not sort of outsourcing that to the company. But in Japan, that's actually how it works. People don't take accountability for that. The company will tell them where they'll be in 3 years' time, and their job is to hang in there for 40 years and then retire.
No, you're absolutely right. So
how did you get people's minds to shift out of, well, the company will take care of me to, well, I'm going to take care of me?
Yes, that's a great point. And I think it's very true what you said. In the U.S., we talk about managing upwards, managing your career. And I was, very aggressively did that to get back to Japan. But in Japan, there's definitely a much more of a passive side to employees in their career development. So, you can, as a leader, it's very easy to say, or you have the ability to say, I want you to do this. And then leave to them how they execute. So what we said to every employee is, we want you to create your own career journey and to talk to your manager about it. And we trained all of our managers around how to have that career journey discussion and how it fits into the 70-20-10 of on-the-job training, feedback, and actual training, and to create a plan. And it could be, a rep could say, I love my job. I don't want to change anything. Yeah, but the rep you are right now, maybe you can, in 5 years, become a major hospital rep, or be the sales rep for a major key opinion leader. So even with, you don't have to change your job, but there are degrees of advancement even within your job that you can aspire to when you take time to think about it. And then just consistency of the message of, your career is your responsibility. And so we have a program within Abbwie Japan called My Journey, My Choice. And, it's mine, you have to really spend time thinking about it. And we also really expect our people managers to have those conversations with their employees around that career journey. So every employee in Abbwie Japan has a career journey. Some managers are probably doing it better, executing on it better than others, but nevertheless, we have spent time on it. If you can get 80% of the people to go in that direction, it's a good thing. But we were doing that, and that came back into our employee value proposition. Just to loop back in, they felt that, wow, this company really is interested in my growth. So the first part of EVP was, we're building this company together. They felt that. The second was, they felt that the company was genuinely interested in their development. And the third was around what you'd really hope for in a pharmaceutical company, that we have a portfolio of products that really make a difference for patients' lives. and that you can wake up in the morning feeling good about how we are contributing to society and contributing to patients.
How do you, that's the why, isn't it? That's the why of you come to work and the why you work hard and the why you apply yourself. How do you reinforce that why within Abbwie?
You know, we always talk around patient centricity. And, you know, for those people who are not in the industry, you know, they would probably say it's a bit of a cliche that a pharmaceutical company would be patient centric. And I mean, so, and I won't disagree with that, but, you know, we really truly do embrace it. And we spend a lot of time, you know, having moments of interaction with our patients. We really try to understand the patient journey. We try to walk in the shoes of the patient. You know, we have many programs around understanding our patients more and the impact that we have or can have on our patients. And we look at, for example, a patient journey of that day when you wake up and something doesn't feel right. You know, you went to bed feeling like $1 million, and then the next day you have that moment. Wow, this is what's this? And then how long does it take to get to that innovative therapy that can actually be life-changing? And in some cases, it's years. And then, you know, we have really great products that really are life-changing, and patients don't find it until very late. And, you know, I get letters every month from patients of how our products change their lives. They go to the website, they find out the address, and they say, "Thank you, Abbwie, for changing my life."
And that's very much maybe a patient and somebody in that section or one person. But how do you take that why at the mass level of 1,500 people? How do you communicate constantly that why to the whole body? Like, you might be someone in a back office job or in a non-patient facing job and you're not getting that feedback, but how do you connect with the why?
No, I think it's a good question, and we always struggle with maybe some of those platform functions, the support functions that aren't on the front line. But you know, we always try to emphasize that, you know, we're all part of a team, and we call it one Abbwie, that we are all in this together, and everyone contributes ultimately to, you know, what we say, bringing smiles to patients. My management team, we do quarterly video updates, for example. Before this meeting, I was filming the third quarter update, for example. And we take time in every quarterly update to have some sort of a patient discussion. So this time we were talking about what we're doing to eliminate hepatitis C in Japan, for example. So we just always try to bring it forward. When we launch new products, for example, we have different themes or activities where everyone plays a part in committing to the successful launch of this product and understanding what disease this new product will help to impact. And, you know, so yeah, again, you can't touch, in 1,600 people, you can't touch everybody, but we put that information out there and we try to communicate it in multimedia ways so that people can have the opportunity to understand and feel proud about what they're doing. I mean, look, I'm not a researcher. I'm not a discovery person. You know, I don't do clinical R&D. Those guys are the heroes as far as I'm concerned. I'm just a general manager. But for me, when I learn about some of these diseases, when I get these notes from patients, we share that, and you know, it really, you really believe in the company you work for.
And that video you were shooting, the quarterly ones, you're doing that in Japanese?
Yes.
So that's really impactful, I think.
I hope so. Yes. Yeah. I kind of kick it off. I kind of tee up some of the key points, and then we'll have 3 to 4 management team members or other employees give a little snapshot of what's going on for that quarter. I think in Japan you can't over communicate. It's important, especially in a company this big, and I think that really drives engagement to communicate as much as possible.
Well, you mentioned before about headquarters have no doubt global engagement surveys, and when I've been working in multinational organisations, we had the same things, and you'd be, you know, whipped off to Singapore or Hong Kong with a regional hub for APAC, and everyone would be there, and then they put up the slides, and then there's APAC, the lowest region globally, And it was usually South America, for some reason, always seen it as off the charts in terms of engagement. And APAC was always dismal. And then Japan was the most dismal in APAC. And there was always a lot of pressure from the leadership, usually not located in Japan, of course, saying, yeah, what's wrong with Japan? No, the people are not engaged there. You're not doing a good job leading them, you know. How is it for you when you have those same sorts of comparisons and you look at the Japanese numbers? Are they like that for Abbwie, or are they different? And what are they saying to you about, okay, you know, James wants you to turn that around?
So usually, and yeah, I definitely have a bone to pick about these things, because I think the biggest fault of these surveys is they pick a 5-point scale. And it should be a 4-point scale.
Now, for a lot of people who don't know Japan, why would that be important?
Because they'll always go to 3. They'll always go to 3. So.
And why is that?
Because, I mean, you know, they don't want to rock the boat, right? So you have to do some educating. And whenever we do surveys, we do a 4-point scale internally, because we want people to pick a side. Right? Are you in or are you out? Do you like it or do you not like it? So there's usually 2 things you can do with these 5-point scales. And the first is there's usually some sort of all Japan benchmark, and you can compare to that. And hopefully you're higher than that significantly. So and thankfully, you're right, Abbwie Japan, we are never as good as Chile or Peru or Brazil. These are happy people. Or maybe they've learned to game the system or what have you. So the first thing we always say, let's look at the Japan benchmark. And we're usually very much higher than the Japan benchmark, which is great. And then what I've seen in the 5-point scale is I look to how many people are actually scoring 1 or 2. And if that number is high, then you have a problem. Because, okay, Japanese people in general, if they're a satisfied customer, they'll go to 3. If they're not if they are willing to go to 2 or 1 and to go out there in the red, that means they're really unhappy. That they're going to vocalize. That means that they can't take it anymore. Right? This is a problem for them. So I look at the red, and if I've got, you know, large percentages of 1 or 2, that's an issue. So I don't really pat myself on the back too. Well, if you have 4s and 5s, that's great. That's great. But I look more at how much negative feedback we're getting, because if people are going to really score in a negative sense, then there's something there.
And trust is also a very key thing in Japan. So have you ever been able to ascertain whether, if you're getting lower scores, is that related to a trust issue, or what is that, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on the area of focus for that particular question. But I think fundamentally at the root of it is often trust. Mm-hmm. Yeah. They don't trust their leader, or they don't trust the mission, or they don't trust the process. They just don't believe it. You know, and I think, you know, belief and trust kind of walk hand in hand, right? Mm-hmm. So an employee who's not engaged doesn't believe, right?
How do you get them to believe? How do you turn that around?
Yeah. You know, I think the first thing you have to realize is you can never make everyone happy, right? And there's always going to be 10% of the people who, no matter what you do, hate it, you know? And I think you have to start there. So with that understanding that there's always going to be a few sour apples, or just people who are just generally unhappy with life, you know, no matter what you do.
Is headquarters accommodating around that? Does headquarters understand that Japan will pick 3 out of 5, and that you know, it's different here? Or do they say, James, you know, we want more of a South American result here?
Yeah, I overly communicate to headquarters on these surveys and, you know, really make sure they understand the context. And again, I always go back to the Japan benchmark because...
And where do you get the benchmark from?
Well, the survey that we use has a Japan benchmark, thankfully. Some, you know, in the one that we use. In other companies, there hasn't been a Japan benchmark, which is, you know, and then you have to really explain. But when there is a Japan benchmark, thankfully, you can look to that and differentiate yourself a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't want to say the number, I mean, that's fine, of course. I'm just curious, though, if you look at a Japan benchmark, what number would that be, and how far above that are you guys tracking?
So in the survey that we use, and our last employee engagement survey, the Japan benchmark was around 50% were considered engaged, and we scored it around 70-75%.
So very good.
Pretty good,
Pretty
yeah.
good.
Pretty good. I was pretty happy.
Pretty happy with that.
I think another way you can measure benchmark engagement is the percent of people who actually complete the survey. And we get like 95, 98% of people who actually do the survey. And if they're doing the survey, they're pretty. I mean, that's an indicator of engagement. You know, at least they're engaging to tell you something. So I always try and look at that number as well. And thankfully, we get really good participation rates on our surveys.
No, that's an outstanding participation rate. So I've asked you a number of things,
sure,
James, but is there something I should have asked you about leading in Japan that I haven't?
Oh, I mean, I think all of your questions are really good. It's a very exciting and interesting. I love having these conversations because it makes me think. You know, there might be people out there who think about how can I be successful in Japan, you know, and what do I do? And, you know, I think so the advice that I would give someone who's new to Japan is, you know, first of all, don't just cling on to that best English speaker. I think it's an incredibly risky proposition. I think, you know, even if you're using an interpreter, you have a translator, you have to spend time with people. You have to get out of your office. You know, we have a new office that we just moved into in February. I don't have an office anymore. I sit wherever I sit, and I'm sitting next to people. You know, you have to get out and get uncomfortable.
And I've been in your beautiful new offices, and it is totally open plan.
It is. I
mean, you've got some small booths that people can go and have private conversations or whatever, but everyone is sitting out there, and you definitely don't have an office. I noticed there's a couch you like, though.
There is a couch that I like, yes. There is a couch that I have somewhat staked my claim to. It's a good place to land in between meetings. So, but it's good that people know where to find me as well.
Yeah. So what other advice would you give for newbies to Japan? You know, be careful about over-reliance on the prism view of the entire enterprise in Japan from one person who happens to speak English. What other advice would you give them?
You know, and I talked about it a little bit. I think that when you're trying to set direction or set goals, it's okay to say that we need to do this. We need to find clarity around X, Y, or Z, but then kind of leave it and then challenge the team to come up with options, for example, to give them that opportunity to go back, work on it, and bring something back to you that you can react to. You know, I think a lot of times people that come here, they know they're on a 3-year assignment, for example. So they have 1 year to kind of figure it out, the second year to make some impact, and the third year to find their next place, sort of thing, right? But you know, Japanese people, that's not their life. You know, they're here, right? So it's important to respect what's been done in the past. It's important to realize that you're just a small chapter in a long book, and to really position yourself that way, and to say, look, I want to be part of your story. Please tell me your story. Tell me where you see the story going, and tell me how I can help to drive that story over the next 3 years. And to open yourself up to bringing your abilities to the team to help them in their story. it's not about you, it's about them. And, you're going to be gone in 3 years. And, sometimes if things aren't working out, they know they can wait you out. But if you make yourself a resource available to them for their success, and you position yourself in that way, I think you'll be really pleasantly surprised with the results. Because if there's one thing about Japanese teams, an engaged Japanese team, there's nothing they can't do. It's really amazing, the results that they can do. It's really amazing.
I don't know if you can quote numbers, but just say, for example, when you started, if you can quote sales numbers, for example, if that's possible, how much has it grown from when you started to where it is today?
Well, I can't give exact sales numbers, but what I can do is when I joined, we were the ex-US, we were the number 4 affiliate. Since last year, and for the foreseeable future, we are the number 1 affiliate ex-US.
So that means that outside of America, the Japan operation is the largest, most important operation for Abbwie.
Yes.
Well, congratulations on that.
Thank
That's
you.
a fantastic achievement.
We're very proud of that.
Well done. And, I know I'm conscious of your time, James. You're a busy man, and I just want to thank you for today. James's comments are very, very insightful, and what I love about, I can feel the empathy, power that James has just dealing with me in this interview, and I can really see how, for a Japanese audience, that powerful empathy is going to be very, very effective. So I have no doubts that he could take it to be number 1 major affiliate outside of the USA. So a great result, great interview, great insights, and James, thank you very much.
Thanks so much. I really enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.